And so I'm bringing this up as more of a conversation, a list of items. I'm leaving it open-ended for a reason, without giving you clear, this is what it is, this is what it isn't, because I think these are questions that are coming up, and how the Muslim community, particularly those in Africa of black Muslim origin, however you want to frame that, whether they are second generation, third generation, whether they're descendants of enslaved Africans, and how they deal with both white supremacy but also Arab supremacy as well.
So it's like, this is how I feel about white supremacy, or is it like this is what's happening?
So
What do you expect from?
So so I think that the broader conversation is this issue of supremacy. You have white supremacy, you have Arab supremacy, and how are communities responding? You came in a little late, so you have the issue of particularly how black Muslims respond. This is the topic of today. How particularly individuals who are of black Muslim erasure, the erasing of the legacy of black Muslims. For example, you're in Washington, D.C., you're on this block right here, give you extra context. And this legacy here, right here, was formerly a bakery. This was formerly a Claire Muhammad school, part of the legacy of the Nation of Islam. Individuals who were known in the community. And I was actually asking someone earlier, I said, do you know this? I was down the street. I said, do you know this community? Oh, what is that? Is that a school? They had forgotten about the history that is part of this building and this infrastructure.
I never knew. I'm
Yes, sir.
from 2641 Burning Place.
So now,
Say, Doc, what my brother, back in 1971, I just happened to have been a teacher at MUI in Denver, Colorado. Under the names really don't matter unless you're a researcher. Sister Deborah Fazer, Sister Beverly Murad out of Chicago. But I was a 23, 24-year-old teacher in Muhammad University of Islam. And since we did not have a bakery in Denver, Colorado, we hooked up with the family, whether it was Chicago, whether it was Cleveland, but we finally dealt with here, and we would put $300 worth of bakery products on ice and send it into Stapleton and raise money for the school of Muhammad University of Islam, that most of those students at that particular point in time, they used to book Muhammad's children. So we have to, I always suggest to people, always beware of how you entertain strangers. And Doc, when you were mentioning about the short stocking, not that he doesn't know this, because I know he knows this, but some people who graduated from Harvard, they were using that similar terminology internally on a number of other people, as well as the Honorable Marcus Mozart Garvey. Most people, they don't really know Garvey because they have not studied the spiritual system of Garvey. They spend too much time studying the political or the economic system. What is his spiritual inheritance? Okay? It just so happened that he was Catholic, but though he was Catholic, he studied under Deuce Muhammad Ali and a whole lot of other stuff, and now shut down. But what happens with us, as he's stating, we have to tell the stories. And just like the people who are 25 back to 10 years of age in terms of this computers, as elaboratous as one becomes with that, one can grow to become elaboratous in time because it's a matter of repetition of the stories.
I wanted to point out one example that to me was really powerful. A couple of years ago, well, it could be 10, 15 years ago at this point, because you start to lose how long ago it was. But I don't know how many people know Dr. Aziza Al-Hibri, who when she was a young woman, she met Malcolm X. He came to her university. She was at school in Lebanon. And she was, not conversant with U.S. politics, so she was part of a student group that had him to come speak. But then the administration said, you can't be airing U.S. dirty laundry, and also, there was a level of racism that was going on. They told her she couldn't have him to speak, but the students decided they would just not really hear that, and they went ahead and had him to speak, and she spent some time with him. And then, after he'd been gone for 50 years, so I guess this has to be quite a few years ago, she released some correspondence that she had with him that she had kept private at his request, but after some years she decided that some pieces could be let out. And I do think it was a really big deal for her immigrant Muslim community to be hearing about this history that was, considered really separate. And, I thought that was a really interesting, and that whole story is just so touching and interesting, and I think it does show that in Asia, in Africa, and in the United States, we just, there's a lot of different layers of supremacy that are going on.
Was that the 59 path or the 64 path that you were speaking of?
I think it was 60, it was right before he died.
Well,
Right
thank you.
before- right
Because
before-
that's very important. Because what happens is that in the milieu of the storytelling, as most of the people, because if you notice, I said 1971, not because I'm a persnicketist, but I want people to have a context of the decade that we're talking about.
Yeah, he'd already.
No, but I mean, I knew you were talking about 64
Okay.
because of the context.
What's also very,
What
hold on a
does
second.
persnicketist mean?
Huh?
What does persnicketist?
Like
Just
being
when
really
I
picky.
use that big ass word just to be using big ass words.
To be really picky. Okay, I think we got it.
It don't mean nothing. I mean, it's like having fun, you know what I mean? Some of us grew up in two African descendant barbershops in this country, which Carter G. Woodson suggested to us at one particular point in time that it stands in some Negro barbershops. It stands a greater airing of the truth than in most so-called Negro colleges and universities, according to the Negro History Journal of roughly 1938.
What I also would say on, and this is an important, it's interesting, is that the first language of Malcolm X's biography, it was translated into Turkish.
Huh.
And it's very interesting that Turkey's relationship with the broader, with black Muslims is interesting, if you will. And I'm using this for a reason. I'm not comfortable with the term black Muslims per se, but we'll use that for the sake of argument for now. The Nation of Islam's flag borrows from the Turkish flag because the Ottoman Empire was part of the imagination of what Muslims were considering and viewing in America, one. Secondly, President Erdogan came to Muhammad Ali's funeral too as well, though he was not allowed to speak. And he did this during, just when Muhammad Ali was buried too as well, because of the influence that Muhammad Ali has had on the consciousness through of the broader Muslim world. It's interesting too as well that we've seen, for their own reasons, that Hassan al-Banna, you might have heard of. Hassan al-Banna is like the developer of what we know modern day Muslim Brotherhood, the ideological force behind a lot of these contemporary Muslim movements. And Hassan al-Banna, when he came to the United States, he was viewing this idea of classical music being very high and very pristine, but he said that jazz music was very much unsophisticated, unrefined, not important. And it's interesting how they remarked on this, but also appreciated the influence of what black life brought. So this, I think the broader world, the selective extracting of what is important and what is important based off of what they see as beneficial for them too as well. So it's important to look at the broader aspect of Muslim influence or African American influence, black Muslim influence in the broader Muslim imagination. People quote black Muslims quite often. Like I said, Malcolm X's autobiography was part of the rallying call for many of these quote unquote conservative Muslim movements who use that as a means to resist against the state. It was a different form of resistance against the state that I think African American life, black Muslim life, was challenged up against in the American context. And it's interesting how that's being played out even in the contemporary context.
If I may, I'd like to footnote a couple other points about the Turkish community involvement with the Muslim community. The first hijra, the first flight that the brother named Lomax Bey under Noble Drew Ali, when the conflict went on, some shooting went on, you could read about it. He took flight to Turkey. There's newspaper articles about him in Turkey in 1933, 1934. And Turkey is being a ditch digger. And he was talking about trying to bring a couple thousand, you know, they said use the word Negroes to make hijra to Turkey, but it didn't work out. And then he wound up going to Egypt. Then he wound up coming back being known as Dr. Ezzeldine, the Lahuddin community out in New Jersey, the people that buried Malcolm and Betty Shabazz. The other thing the Turkish community did is that Atlantic Records, Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, all of them, it was a Muslim. Ahmed, father, he started Atlantic Records, and his father was a Turkish ambassador, and he used to allow the African American people to come play jazz in the Turkish embassy. The third thing that comes to my mind about the Turkish community, Imam Warthi Muhammad said that when he took over his leadership, the membrah, the stand that they stand on, he said the tradition usually is 3 steps, but the one that was at Masjid al-Fatih was 5 steps. The Turkish goes a little higher. If you go to the Dinat Center, you can see that their steps are higher than normal. They gave them that. And then the last thing comes to my mind is in 1974, Honorable Elijah Muhammad's last Savior's Day. Some people may say he had white folks on the stage, but he said these are your brothers, these are your sisters. They was Turkish Muslims that he was pointing out at that point. So there's been that intertwined in that relationship there.
And I stand to be correct, I didn't mean to say Hassan al-Banna, Sayyid Qutb. Sayyid Qutb wrote Milestones, 2 distinct individuals, both Egyptian.
I want to apologize, man. Look, this is a lot of pressure here. On me!
Well, since we're such a small group, could you just show it on the laptop and we could, we could.
Well, if I could just get it
scroll,
up.
because it doesn't look like. Oh.
Oh, it didn't display as a laptop.
Probably got control.
Yeah, do you just want to
all
use my laptop and just, yeah, let's just do that. We'll just
Mashallah, about time y'all start.
No, I was saying.
I only got 10 more gray hair. My brother came out and helped out some big words just to tell big vert y'all. Come on, man.
I think it opened up.
Well, it's
Go
come that far and then it just isn't.
We'll just do this.
It did open up.
Okay.
It did open. It's open. Now
Now
let
Now
me
you
see
gotta
the
open
file.
the file.
Yeah, let me get the
Yeah,
file.
the PowerPoint is on.
Oh, right
I mean,
there?
yeah, I
The
saw it.
recent-
Let me get the
Yeah,
file.
see, unpacking white supremacy, isn't that it?
Yeah, that's it.
So click on
You
that.
gotta click it. You gotta
You
click
got-
it.
No, I don't have the file in it. She got the disc.
We
need
know
the
this
disc.
will work home.
Oh.
This might just be easier.
Well, while this comes up, I can go off the top of my head. Probably won't be in order. I have pictures. So for those of you who came in late, I am Mia Carey. I'm the archaeologist for the 2015 Yarmouth Archaeology Project. This project was started in 2012 by James H. Johnston, who wrote the book From Slave Ship to Harvard, Yarmouth and the History of an African American Family. He happened to walk past Yarrow's portrait in the Georgetown Public Library and wanted to know who this black man was. So that kind of ignited his story. We were notified in 2012 because the house at 3324 Dent Place was about to be destroyed. Hurricane Irene had destroyed the second story in 2013, and it had sat blighted for 2 years. You don't leave a house like that blighted in Georgetown. So this is right across the house, right across the street from where JFK lived as a senator. So the second day of my internship, we got permission from the landowner. We kind of hit the ground running. We were in the field for four months. And for those of you who don't know who Yarrow is, he was an enslaved African Muslim who was brought to the U.S. in about 1752 aboard the Elijah. He was purchased by Samuel Beale. Beale was a wealthy landowner in Montgomery County, Maryland. When he died in about 1777, he bequeathed Yarrow to one of his sons, but then he eventually became the property of his son Brooke. In about 1788 or 1789, Brooke brought Yarrow, his family, and the rest of his enslaved population to Georgetown. In 1796, Brooke promised Yarrow that if he made bricks for his new home, he would be manumitted or freed. Unfortunately, Brooke died before the house was completed, but his widow followed through. So he was freed in August 1796. 4 years later, he purchased the property at 3324 Dent Place in Upper Georgetown. But he became well known after he sat for a formal portrait in 1819 by Charles Wilson Peale. Peale came to DC to paint presidential portraits, but it heard a rumor of a man that was 140 years old. Now, Yarrow was only about 60 or 70 at the time, but Peale believed in longevity. He believed that people could live to be 200 years old, so he had to meet him. So over the course of the 2 days, he painted Yarrow. He also wrote down his story. And so as he learned, he grew more interested. After the portrait was completed, he went to Margaret Beale, Brooke Beale's widow, to find out if Yarrow's story was true. So she told him yes, that Yarrow was manumitted for being a loyal, industrious slave, that he had earned $100 twice and lost it to two merchants who died. He became one of the first investors in the Bank of Georgetown.